It seems really only minutes ago that I was doing a piece about Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, how they were squabbling, and Nigel Farage thought Boris was a bit of a twit. And suddenly, last thing at night, I come across a piece in the Mail on Sunday. And Nigel Farage reportedly is paving the way for an electoral alliance with Boris Johnson. I suppose it should raise eyebrows, not least because Boris Johnson isn't an MP, and the very notion of a mega party led by the duo seems to oscillate between camaraderie and mutual disdain. At best, it's an exercise in speculative fiction. But this alleged collaboration, as reported in the Mail on Sunday, contradicts recent statements, historic grievances, making a curious political fable rather than a concrete strategy. And just days ago, it was suggested that Farage regarded Boris Johnson as a political liability. And this assessment is not new. Farage has long been dismissive of Johnson's competence, particularly over Brexit. He's accused Johnson of botching the withdrawal, betraying the Brexit cause, abandoning promises made to reform voters. To pivot from this to an electoral partnership seems a remarkable act of political amnesia. And the fundamental flaw in this exclusive revelation is that Boris Johnson currently holds no seat in the Commons. For him to lead any kind of formal electoral project, he would need to be parachuted into a safe seat, an unlikely scenario given Kemi Badenoch's leadership, given her firm stance against appeasing Reform UK, given, I suspect, her dislike of Boris Johnson herself. The idea that the Conservatives would cede a seat for him to execute his grand coalition defies party logic and Badenoch's own authority. For Farage, this story serves as a useful narrative. The suggestion of a mega party combining Reform and the Conservative signals to wavering right-wing voters that he holds the upper hand. I'm not shallow. And if Reform manages to maintain a strong polling position, he would expect to dictate terms, including the abandonment of net zero politics or policies and governmental restructuring akin to Trump's appointing figures like Elon Musk to cabinet roles. But the odds of such a deal materialising in reality, I think, are relatively slim. Boris Johnson's purported interest in a pact seems at odds with his reported strategy. Johnson's allies argue that the Tories must carve out their own identity rather than mirror Reform's policies. Johnson's refusal to defect from the Conservatives suggests he views Farage as an expedient figure rather than a viable long-term partner. And the political arithmetic in this scenario is also dubious. The claim that a Reform-Tory merger would trounce Labour ignores the complexities of party loyalties and tactical voting, and polling figures placing Labour, the Tories and Reform within striking distance of one another suggests that a three-horse race could splinter the right rather than consolidate it. And all of this apparently has been brokered by Robert Jenrick, who was Badenoch's immediate adversary in the recent Conservative leadership race. Jacob Rees-Mogg, a vocal proponent of a Reform pact, warns that without a pact, Labour could retain power. And would a mega party actually change that? Even if Reform and the Conservatives combined forces, there's no guarantee that disillusioned Tory voters would embrace Farage's brand of politics. And here is what I suggest is being discussed. What is being discussed is the possibility of parachuting Boris into the House of Lords to become a sort of a leader, by a sort of vicarious leader. The actual leadership would be under Robert Jenrick, because Badenoch's time will be due. She'll be called out within months, I would have thought, and Jenrick will come in because he's the only person capable, I suggest, of mounting a successful takeover. There's nobody else around. Tom Tugendhat has had a number of attempts and hasn't quite energised the party. There are no obvious alternatives. Penny Mordaunt isn't in the party. She isn't in Parliament. I think Jenrick is setting up a campaign. And that is the source of this discussion. It's Jenrick who's talking to Farage. It's Jenrick who's proposing the deals, because in the end, it will be in Jenrick's gift, and Jenrick may propose a Boris safe seat or a Boris in the House of Lords, one way or another. Boris will be there to back up Jenrick rather than take over. The notion of a Farage-Johnson electoral pact is less a serious proposal than an opportunistic headline grabber. It allows Farage to reinforce his position as the dominant force on the right while providing Johnson with an air of political relevance despite his parliamentary absence. And ultimately, this story is not about a real electoral alliance. It's about the continued turbulence on the right of British politics, where figures like Farage and Johnson use speculation to sustain influence rather than shape concrete strategy. And as with many such exclusives, the key takeaway is not the plausibility of the pact, but rather the desperation of the people who are fueling the idea behind it.